in today's world now we have the ability to collect data simultaneously from multiple clients, patients across the world, applying certain parameters. So we have this massive collection of data that has allowed for that truth to resonate out to the world in a much quicker way. Whereas it's kind of like, I go back to religion, prior, not you really go back even just 60 or 70 years, people weren't allowed to read the Bible. Like, you didn't even actually have the Bible. You couldn't really explore your own religion. You had to go to the church to get the information. And I almost feel like the medicine has been in a large part that way too. It's been a church or an indoctrination of thought processes and beliefs, and almost like in a sense of religion, where questioning the authoritative powers that be that have already come to a certain conclusion and said, this is now fact.
Finished, yeah.
Yes, we can no longer question this. That's not science. And, I think to your point, you enjoy the science aspect of the other side because it allows you to see true scientific endeavors. At least it does for me too. I like the science because it allows me to see the data that others have done and the outcomes that others have collected. And it allows us to see how things are different, even from our own current belief status. So like our current beliefs are challenged all the time as a result of real, true science, which never is settled.
That's right.
And it's certainly not settled around the area of vaccines. But it's interesting to me. I didn't know that. I didn't know that because I didn't go to medical school. That even in the pediatric rotation, you're not given the hard science and the evidence and the proof on how these vaccines work. You're just given the schedule. Now, you also mentioned in your book that you received an hour of nutritional training. Was it an hour? Yeah,
it was an hour. I remember. I remember it because at the time, my diet was pretty questionable, and I was a total sugar addict and drank literally 6 cups of coffee a day. And I remember thinking in this hour, this is uncomfortable, the couple of little bit of guidance around calories and, don't drink soda or whatever. It was like a window dressing, right? It was presented as this is, something you'll say as your patient's walking out the door, by the way, if you can stop getting the big gulp at 7-Eleven, that'd probably be good. But it was never, ever framed as even relevant on the level of treatment intervention, let alone biologically relevant. So, and that, who knows, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm too forgiving, but I think it's relatively new, our understanding of nutrigenomics and the role of inflammation in, the diseases of modern civilization and the relationship of nutrition to that inflammatory messaging. The timing may have just not been right, but I imagine it's probably not super different now. And the trouble is that whenever these lifestyle interventions are framed as a complement, this is my perspective, very biased perspective. When they're framed as a complement, because of our sociocultural conditioning, there's zero chance for them to actually have the impact that they could have if they were foregrounded, right? So in my practice, these lifestyle prescriptions are do not pass go, right? This is where your work starts, and it does not start before it starts here, right? So we're not dealing with your psychological issues, your toxic relationships, your job, none of that. We're first starting here. We're not tapering your medication. And so the primacy of this approach to lifestyle change, I think, is part of what makes it work and part of what makes it appear irrelevant when it's just kind of sidelined in green pharmacy or, sort of the greening of conventional medicine.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I mean, I was at a cancer walk a couple of years ago and they were selling Coke and donuts.
Exactly.
And so how can you really take the nutritional aspect seriously when at these major hospitals, at these major events that are designed to raise money and awareness for major diseases that are being pharmaceutically treated,
right? When
you're selling donuts and you're selling Coca-Cola and that industry has a direct influence over it, the window dressing of, hey, maybe don't eat that, drink that big gulp or have that hot dog from the, from the case that's been in there rotating for 6 months.
It's internally consistent, though. That's what I've come to appreciate. It's not like they're being ignorant. It's internally consistent because that kind of cancer treatment is predicated on the belief, it's a belief, that cancer is a genetic disease, right? So if it's a genetic disease, then what you eat actually doesn't matter, right? What you think doesn't matter, what you breathe doesn't matter, that your smart meter is outside of your bedroom wall doesn't matter. None of that matters. So it's kind of like all makes sense within itself. And that's why I believe in kind of like picking your tent, right? So that you can do the deep work of sealing all the doors and windows and really being inside it and figure out, like, who are you in this tent? Does it feel good? Does it feel true? Does it feel like the kind of life that you came here to live, right? So that's why, you know, I've been probably rightfully accused of being, you know, pretty absolutist about my perspective and my feeling that integrative medicine it really can be an arrested state of development sometimes for some people. And for others, it's probably perfect. I don't know. But I think it's important for us to look at just all of the message. Everything matters, right? All of the messages and all of the meaning, and really see how it is that we are communicating to ourselves about our symptoms, about our relationship to illness. Like, what are we telling ourselves about it? Because that is the voice that turns the genes on and off, right? That's the one that really matters.
So that really, that power of belief is what I hear you saying. It doesn't matter. I mean, even if you take a person who believes fully in conventional methodologies versus, let's say, an alternative methodology, they're probably in the right place. If their belief is that chemo is absolutely beyond the shadow of a doubt the right thing for them to do, then that's the thing that is going to help them the most, versus this person over here who's more of an alternative and absolutely believes beyond the shadow of a doubt that diet change and exercise and you know, setting themselves up in that way is the right move. And so if you have a mismatch on either side of the equation, it's not going to probably be a very good outcome. Is that
100%? And that's why I have become, I think, chiefly an advocate for informed consent, right? Because the tragedy, perhaps, you know, that the challenge, the kind of wince as a clinician comes when somebody just didn't have the information in time, right? And had they been exposed to the information, they might have made a different decision. And I hear that so many times over and over and over and over again from the people that I work with who are coming off of these medications after many decades and really going through the potentially disabling process of psychotropic withdrawal, right? Like, if I had only known. And so that's why we're in, again, an exciting time where Google algorithmic updates aside, we can get information, right? We can find out, what is the other side? What's this side? What's the fourth side, the fifth side? You know, what are all the different perspectives? Which one feels right to me? And once everyone is doing that, then I feel like we're going to organize ourselves on the most healing track for us personally. But outside of a true informed consent model, which is not available through the conventional paradigm, trust me, when I was prescribing, I couldn't possibly have properly consented a single patient. I did not have exposure to the literature, and I had no motivation or incentive to find it. So I only could present to them the literature that I was taught. And so that's why we're in this age where, again, if you want to rely dependently on your doctor, odds are you could violate yourself. You could end up betraying yourself, you know?
So you just said something. I'm going to back up. You said you are not incentivized to seek out the other end of the equation, and you were only providing what you were taught. Yeah. So tell me, does that mean, or does how much influence, okay, again, not having gone through medical school myself, but in your experience, how much influence does pharmacy have, number one, on the teaching? Because if you're graduating with this, you know, it's battery of tools that you can now prescribe these medications to, you know, to help people's problems. Well, how much influence is bias, in your opinion, from a favorable, you know, pro-pharma type of impact versus a balanced look at, okay, these are the risks, these are the benefits, this is the numbers needed to treat values of these medications, like this is what you should really be explaining to your patient from an informed consent basis? Or was it more kind of biased toward, hey, if somebody's got depression, these are the top 5 or 6 medications you want to start with this one? Because in psychiatry, there's no objective basis for anything. It's all couch talk, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct.
But it's super subjective. And so there's no measuring of neurotransmission. There's no measuring of vitamin and mineral cofactors designed to help play a role in the production of dopamine or serotonin or any of those other things. There's no measuring of genetic potential for a person to react worse to a medication because they have a particular mutation. So it really truly is like trial by fire. Like, here's the drug. I hope it works for you. Come back in a little while for me. So again, going back to my original question, how much of that bias is there, or how much of, in your experience, was it there that kind of led you toward a path where not really giving great informed consent is now the status quo of the entire profession? So people don't even really know.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I trained in the era of, being courted by pharma reps at 5-star restaurants in New York. So it wasn't so cloaked that there was a all too cozy relationship between, the doctors running the hospitals and the pharmaceutical companies providing, an improvement in our quality of life. And I remember thinking, because I had a colleague, I don't know what you want to say, like a co-resident who was very against going to pharma dinners and all of the things, accepting gifts from them. And I remember arguing with her and saying, I researched these medications. I'm not going to prescribe or not prescribe Risperdal based on, a dinner at Nobu with Sohail, so I was very defensive about it. But there's just some, as human beings, we seek psychological bias. I mean, it's actually the default operating system. And so we are always going to be looking through the lens of our personal reality, right? So I learned that, I think, in a very deep way, because when I prescribed to pregnant and breastfeeding women and I did my specialization in that arena, we cared about informed consent. Like I said earlier about those flu vaccines, we had 2-hour, consultation sessions with the couple, and I learned all about the registry data available to defend the prescribing of these medications. And so I feel like I learned about informed consent in the conventional model and really valuing it, right? And that's how I know that it's not available, and it's not even necessarily about pharma influence. It's more systemic than that, right? It's deeper than that. It's simply even about the belief system again, right? Because I talked about the risks of medication exposures to the fetus, right? I talked about the risk of untreated, quote unquote, mental illness for these women. But because I didn't understand, know about, and had never been exposed to the concept of root cause reversal, the concept of identifying the why of the symptoms, there wasn't really any viable alternative perspective that would relativize the risks and benefits, right? So
now, on that note, so you just said something, you said identifying the why of the symptoms. Now, when you started your career path, probably undergrad, biology of some sort, and then going on to medical school, was it not your intention, like going in, and was it not the intention of many doctors? Because I don't think doctors are evil or malintended at all. But was it not your desire to know why? Or is that somehow like stamped out as you go through that process of education? No. Or is it, you mentioned that it's deeper than bias because it's systemic. So I'm just trying to understand that a little bit.
It wasn't even a factor that I knew to consider. Like there's this phrase, I think it's Merleau-Ponty or something, missing is any sense that anything is missing, right? So I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that asking why was even a possibility. All I knew, in fact, I volunteered at a suicide hotline where I went to college at MIT, where there are a number of completed suicides. That sparked my interest in psychiatry. And all I knew was suffering is bad. It feels bad to them. It feels bad to me. How do we make it stop? So making it stop was the declared objective. And I was totally on board with that. So was the caller or whatever. And that's exactly the contract, unspoken, often between doctor and patient in the conventional model, is how do we make this stop, right? So there's not a concept of, oh, you make it stop by addressing the why. Oh, the sink stops overflowing when you turn off the faucet. It's more like, do we have extra mops and do you have a rag over there? Like, how many do you have? Because I need like 20, and do you have 50? You know, it's more like that. So it's simply a process of beginning to kind of zoom out and understand that we have a choice to think about it differently. So in answer to your question, I do believe that the pharmaceutical influence is immense. It determines not only the curriculum, but the nature of the training. And then there's often this kind of conditioning around the primacy of pharmaceuticals. However, I think it goes beyond that into the realm of religion, really, into the realm of belief around what illness is and how to respond to it. And that's why, I love that Bucky Fuller quote. I can never quite capture in accuracy, but about how you don't fight the existing system, you create a new one that renders it obsolete. And that's what I feel, like we're here to do.
Amen to that. I've got another question for you, and I want to read another passage because there was a section in your book on, it's kind of toward the end, the chapter from Coming Home to You. And I love this paragraph. It says, you must choose whether you believe that your body has an innate wisdom, a vitalism that guides its natively harmonious performance. That illness is evidence of imbalance somewhere physically, mentally, spiritually, interpersonally, nutritionally, and that it is an invitation to engage change in the service of balance. Beautifully written. To me, it boils down to the power of choice.
Yes.
So could you kind of speak and elaborate more to that?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because I actually wrote a chapter after, of course, this happens, I'm sure it happens to you too, to every author, right? It's like you've just submitted it and then you have this huge download. I wrote it all about choice, and how that is the most defining feature of the human experience. Is a reflection of the nature of our consciousness, that we can make these choices and that we always have a choice, right? So it's a very important element of a victimless world. And I choose to live in a worldview that says no one is a victim ever. And the reason that I have this kind of like harsh perspective is because that means that everyone is empowered always. And even if you are empowered only to respond, to choose to respond through a scream or a push, to choose to tell or not tell, these little choices still allow you to retain agency, so that nothing can ever make you a dependent, submitted slave, and the perspective that we take on our experiences is what liberates us to perceive our choices, right? So when you have headache and brain fog and, joint pains, and you can't sleep, and you say, oh my God, this is so my job, and this is so terrible, and gosh, like my husband never helps me. When your victim story starts rolling out, all those finger points, that you make, it's like little pieces of your power are donated, right? And then the process of reclaiming all of that can be, quite a journey. But I think that if we can retain the choice to respond, if we can retain the choice to represent and narrate our experience through elective language, that's a big part of the communities that we, run, are really about how to speak. We take posts down, we delete them, we re-educate constantly, so that all of us have an accountability around how to represent our story totally stripped of victimhood. And people aren't always happy about it initially, but it's a conditioning that can save your life, right? So I think the catch around choice is that you can really only exercise it when you know that you have it, right? If you don't know you have a choice, then you actually don't have a choice. But the moment that you know you have one, then you're empowered to create your experience of your reality. And someone who's influenced me a lot in this realm is Byron Katie. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she is, she's a teacher who believes that we can end our own suffering through the examination of our thoughts and inquiry into the kinds of thoughts that are keeping us arrested in victimhood. And when I discovered her work, which was actually after my book, I thought, wow, this is a woman after my own heart, because it's those victim stories that keep you, it's like literally an anchor with a chain to the bottom of the ocean. And it's so easy to fall into the seeming comfort of them and the seeming familiarity even. It's like well-worn grooves of the story that says, poor me, it's not fair. But that's your child self. And you're probably ready to show up to soothe that, child self and to declare your more evolved, mature perspective about what's happening in the world.
Yeah, I love it. I don't think it's harsh at all. The world, in my opinion, there are no victims. There are, there are thoughts of victimhood. There are certainly bad scenarios that people go through. And I think everybody in life goes through an ebb and a flow. I mean, it throws curveballs at us all, but that doesn't make victims of us all. It just makes us all more resilient depending on how we weather those different storms. And that, it's the mentality. I think so many people in today's world, and to not get political, but I'm going to get political, take handouts and let the government or let someone else take their power from them in exchange for something that keeps them bound and in bondage is a horrible thing. It's indentured servitude, and it doesn't go away. And in the health arena, it's really a problem, at least in my philosophical belief pattern, that, when you give somebody something to silence their pain, you're really just silencing their body's way of trying to adapt to warning them to make something change or to experiment as to why that might be happening so that they can be empowered to really identify where it's coming from. And to me, it's the guise of compassion, right? You said it, we trained to stop people's pain because that's what the mantra is. And so it's not within anyone's power to stop somebody else's pain. It's within the person's power to stop their own pain. And that's why I love the title. I love everything about what you've written here, because you literally have to own yourself first.
Yourself. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.